Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 10th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your latest weather information on Marine VHF, NOAA Weather Radio, or our website, weather.gov/Alaska. The weather info line at 800-472-0391 is working for you today. And, of course, the National Weather Service is on Facebook, both at NWS and NWS Alaska, if you'd like to look at the rest of the nation. On Twitter, NWS Alaska, Fairbanks, Anchorage, or Juneau, if you want to put in any of those cities after the NWS part. AKwx is the hashtag we ask you to use if you're communicating about weather, whether it's just to share a lovely picture of Alaska or want to share some storm damage or something very interesting going on in your community and village. That helps us see that you're talking about weather, and then perhaps we can reshare that as well. In the afternoons, of course, on NWS Alaska, NWS Anchorage, and NWS Fairbanks, you can get a quick brief of the weather maps coming your way that you'll see here on Alaska Weather each day. That's around 4 o'clock. And, of course, you can search for the entire show on AKwx TV in the evenings after this broadcast is complete on Alaska Public. Tonight's hazardous weather shows southeast is still under the gun for some heavier snowfall amounts around Haines and Skagway. Winter storm warnings are in effect, and they'll continue as we head into tomorrow. A total of 8 to 12 inches of snow is possible there, with winter weather advisories shaded in yellow here. That includes Juneau, Gustavus, out toward Yakutat. Those areas are likely expecting lesser amounts of snow, but still a winter event for you, 3 to 7 inches of snow with higher amounts again toward the higher terrain. Now looking northward, it's not so much about the snow, it is about the wind and the cold that's already in place. So as the rubber meets the road there, if there's any rubber actually touching the road with snow on the ground, dangerous wind chills are expected there. And this is some pretty serious cold there. It could feel as cold as 65 below across the central Beaufort Seacoast and across the north and western slopes of the Brooks Range. For most of the coastal areas where many of the villages are, the wind chill values may be a little bit less. Not better, but maybe not as bad as what you're seeing here in the red shaded areas. That could be between 60 to 65 below, Kaktovik, Barrow, Wainwright, down toward Point Hope. Those wind chill values only, and I hesitate to use that word, but only 55 below. So wind chill advisories there. The same goes for the southeastern slopes of the Brooks Range, including Arctic Village and around Anaktuvik Pass and southward toward the Yukon Flats. Those values as well tonight and into early tomorrow morning could hover around 55 below. Just a little bit of wind making you feel just tremendously cold. So use extreme caution, especially if you're in those red shaded regions from Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, westward across the Brooks Range slopes and north of Arctic Village through the Brooks Range in the east. All those areas can see some very dangerous cold in just a matter of seconds. They're doing some severe damage to your skin. Be careful. Looking out west, we see low pressure hovering just south and west of the Kamchatka Peninsula, and it is still just kind of sitting there and spinning. High pressure is trying to hold that back with the dominant flow across the North Pacific moving from east to west right now. And you can see one of these circulations well south of Unalaska. You'll notice as that moisture is moving eastward slowly, it's going to meet up with colder air. And as that's happening, we're going to start to see a better chance for some snow showers around places like Dillingham and generally north of King Salmon. King Salmon and southward, chances are you're still going to be dealing with a rain and snow mix from time to time. Sure, you'll get a little bit of snow, but then during the day that may kind of mix in with a better chance of rainfall there. The northeasterly flow is also pushing the ice edge, and as it continues moving south, we'll be seeing that creeping toward St. Paul. Now, the first thing you're going to see is that open water starting to fill up with some strips, and that's around 35 nautical miles, I believe, at this point, to the north and east. The more solid concentrations are still another about 10 nautical miles north of that. But the ice edge is advancing, and you can kind of pick that out here with the colder air showing up on the satellite picture. This is just kind of a little bit further north of where the ice edge is, but we'll have an updated graphic for you and zoom in on the Pribilofs to give you a better idea of where this is. Across eastern parts of the Gulf, you can see the moisture just wrapping back up into southeast right now. We have one circulation here supported by the upper levels. Another circulation's already broken off of that, and we're going to see several waves of frontal boundaries kind of working their way northward and then breaking off and working over southwest and the Alaska Peninsula with just deep cold across the interior, as well as some winds from time to time making the interior feel even colder. Here's a look at the satellite movement one more time, and you can see the general flow there coming up from the Pacific Northwest, just soggy with moisture, and all this is working into that colder air that's banked up against some of the higher terrain in southeast. Meanwhile, not a lot of moisture moving across the Arctic coast. It's high pressure time, and it looks like most of that is slowing the winds down for most areas there. Not a whole lot of wind moving through as best we could tell, but the gaps and the passes are the places where those wind chill values are going to be the worst. Here's a look at the weather map, and stationary boundary now just along the Chugach Range and eastern sections of southeast. And as you look into the central part of the Gulf, we had some stronger winds here too, even storm warnings out earlier today. 993 millibar low there across the eastern half of the Gulf. Another wave dropping southward. With that, some pockets of snow across the Alaska Range in the west, some areas of light rain across the Alaska Peninsula, and some light snow there around Haines earlier this afternoon with high pressure in the north. Several waves of low pressure moving from east to west around that. The best chance for accumulating snow will likely be across northern parts of southeast tonight and Yakutat. We'll also see some light snow chances there across south central and maybe a few areas of coastal southwest Alaska, generally south of, or north I should say, of King Salmon, including Dillingham. But that risk will be fairly low for most areas in southwest. The Pribilofs may see some light snow. Periods of rainfall for the Alaska Peninsula, and again, we're watching the wind factor across the west, and any amount of that wind moving is going to make it feel tremendously colder, especially across the Arctic tonight. Areas of blowing and drifting snow possible along the Alcan border, it looks like, and just south of that, there's a chance for some snow working up through the Talkeetnas and northward as we head through Wednesday. A lot of that, though, will start to wind down very quickly across south central and into Kodiak Island. It looks like you'll probably be dealing with some light rain. For southeast, periods of rain mixed with snow in the south, but for northern areas it could continue to snow, especially around Haines, Skagway, Juneau, northward toward Yakutat as that front continues to work its way in and starts to weaken. Another wave moving from east to west will stir up some rain and snow across the central and eastern Aleutians, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor probably right there on that line. Most of the Alaska Peninsula will be dealing with some light rain as well as Kodiak, and as we get into Thursday, a little bit of colder air drops into the region. You may see rain and snow in the morning, but chances are by the afternoon again, Kodiak Island will be back in liquid precipitation. All rain for southeast by Thursday, so quite a mess if you still have snow on the stoop there. That's going to be a soggy nightmare as you get into Thursday. And for south central and areas northward, you're still dealing with a rain and snow mix probably by Thursday as conditions continue to warm up. As you look a little bit further northward, the chance of snow seems to be dwindling a little bit more for areas around the middle Tanana Valley, but there's still an opportunity for a few snow showers there, but that risk seems to be drying up just a little bit more. Some pockets of blowing snow across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and still just nasty cold it looks like. Out across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, snow showers there. A little bit further north, though, as you get out of Bethel and into the Norton Sound region, generally from Unalakleet south and then up into the Yukon Valley. There might be some light accumulating snow. It doesn't seem to reach Nome at this point. And out across the central chain, you're still looking at snow showers there. A little bit further eastward, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. That's likely rain and snow showers. Here's a look at temperatures today, the 30s and 40s for most of southeast, but as you get up toward Juneau, Haines and Skagway, teens and 20s were the rule. Gustavus around 30, Sitka about 41, Port Alexander 45, and pretty mild weather as you get down into Haida Gwaii, Ketchikan, and Annette. Hyder was 32. Prince William Sound was in the 20s and 30s. Montague Island 39, about the same there in Seward. Homer was 40. 23 in Anchorage. Temperatures coming up considerably with a southerly flow returning. Most of the Copper River Basin was sub-zero today. Down the road in Tok and Northway, it was about 16 below. Eagle warming up to 10 below, but many folks that are following the race there across the Yukon Valley and most of the areas out of the Yukon itself are still seeing tremendously cold weather, and as you may have heard some of the news there, one of the favorite mushers has dropped out at this point. Up around Talkeetna and Squenda, mid to upper 20s there as that warmer air moves up the Susitna Valley. 9 below around Fairbanks, 35 below in Fort Yukon. Anywhere from 17 to as cold as 40 below across the Brooks Range, and these are just temperatures, not the wind chill values. The Arctic coast 20 to 30 below. Kotzebue Sound readings from 5 to 20 below there. Looks like Tin City holding at 8 below, Nome up to 11 above, with Unalakleet at 1 above. Bethel was showing 4, McGrath only 1, so not too cold for you. Looked like Galena was 19 below though. 20s and 30s around Bristol Bay, lower 40s for Kodiak Island, 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and St. Paul and St. George both in the 20s today. Overnight low temperatures will remain miserably cold around Fort Yukon at 47 below and 25 to as cold as 40 below for the Arctic coast. The Seward Peninsula anywhere from 3 below in Nome to the Kotzebue Sound side in the 15 to 20 degree below range. It looks like Kotzebue itself could be as cold as 30 below, probably colder up toward Red Dog Mine. Teens and 20s for Southwest, including Bristol Bay, 38 around Kodiak, with 30s for most of the chain in the Alaska Peninsula. St. Paul at 24 with a high of 25 tomorrow. The interior, Fairbanks is looking at about 7. South Central in the lower 30s as we head into your Wednesday, 41 in Kodiak, and 30s and 40s for Southeast, with Barrow looking at 15 below. IFR conditions are going to continue for a large part of the Copper River Basin and about the southern half of the Alcan border, parts of southeast tomorrow, especially coastal southeast, with MVFR slowly dropping to IFR, I think, around Chilkoot and White Pass, and Juneau may flirt with IFR from time to time. South of Bethel, you'll find some patchy IFR throughout the day, and along the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula and around Kodiak Island. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass right now don't look too bad. VFR conditions for you there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass may see some improvement throughout the day, but we'll likely start those out at IFR during your Wednesday. Rainy Pass should be MVFR. Snow showers possible in Windy Pass. We'll call that MVFR. Isabel Pass also expected to be instrument flight rule throughout your day. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions there by the end of the day. As we get in toward Tanita Pass, also looking at IFR conditions. Same goes for Portage Pass with a better chance of snow tomorrow. And Chilkoot and White Pass, yeah, I think those ceilings are going to be dropping down with winter storm warnings and advisories in the region. Plan on poor visibility in those passes. Freezing levels show 2, 4, 6,000 foot freezing lines creeping up through southeast and then dropping to about 2,000 feet around Kodiak Island and just breaking over the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, status quo, the surface freezing line south of the Pribilofs for now, as it looks like with icing potential, generally above 2,000 to 4,000 feet there and then higher across southwest and the Bristol Bay region, as well as the eastern Aleutians. Below 12,000 feet for the Alcan border, including Eagle to about Fairbanks there, but some of that could be occasional moderate if you're flying. And around Yakutat and southward toward the Cross Sound region above 5,000 feet there, you might run into some occasional moderate icing potential. The jet stream still shows our deep carved southward trough of low pressure across the jet stream track here from about 140 to 170 knots, driving southward quickly and then rising just as quickly northward toward southeastern Alaska, bringing that Pacific moisture back in. This will keep the west coast pretty dry and fairly warm, it looks like. If you're heading down to California, Washington, or Oregon, things may be fairly tame there for a while. In the meantime, the cold weather keeps on coming on the conveyor belt of the Arctic, coming in from the west and northwest right into the Brooks Range at 50 to 90 knots. At 9,000 feet, you see an inverted trough here. This trough of low pressure, the air is rotating around it in a counterclockwise fashion. That tells us low pressure is extending well into the heart of Alaska. And on the eastern side of that is that southerly, warmer and wetter flow. Wind speeds there from 20 to as high as 50 knots coming into southeast, and then they slow down after they cross the Alaska Range, 10 to 15 knots there. An opposing flow from the west through the Chukchi Sea, around 10 knots or so, right along the coast, and high pressures in charge east of the Kamchatka Peninsula, with northerlies extending all the way across the Bering Sea. If you're in AKwx, you probably know that all too well. Here's a look at 3,000 feet now. Here's our inverted trough once again, and it has a friend. Low pressure sitting right across the Kenai Peninsula, also dragging in some of that colder air down the Alaska Range and through the Susitna Valley for now. South and easterly winds are a little bit more tilted to the west here. You can see them working across southeast around 30 to 40 knots, and an offshore wind continues for the Seward Peninsula with winds around 20 to 35 knots in this case. Turbulence potential will focus on where that frontal boundary is. Below 4,000 feet, watch for some occasional widespread moderate chop there around the front Gulf of Alaska. No doubt we've seen some stronger winds there with storm force winds today, and we'll continue to see some of that as well around the Barren Islands and Bristol Bay, generally below 4,000 feet. Look for the worst turbulence to probably be just along coastal sections of southeast. Also a patch of turbulence there across the Yukon Valley out toward Nome and across the central Aleutians for your day tomorrow. We'll take a look at the latest sea ice edge analysis as well as your marine forecast here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out this morning. It's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in. And you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the Global Positioning System computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
And here's a look at the sea ice edge across Cook Inlet right now. You'll notice a little bit more ice south of Calgan Island now, as south of Kenai. That's starting to break into chunks there and strips, but certainly higher concentrations on the northern end there as you're looking at sea ice across Cook Inlet. You can check this out anytime by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Out across the Bering Sea, this is about 35 nautical miles or so from St. Paul toward the leading ice edge where there's strips. A higher concentration, still another 10 nautical miles north of that, but the overall ice pack is shifting south and southeast by about a nautical mile a day or so. So we've got a little ways to go there. In the next couple days, this will get a little bit closer to St. Paul, and watch for the wind to push some of those strips a little bit further out ahead of that main ice pack. So make sure you're keeping up to date with that if you're out across the Bering Sea and picking up a little bit of crab out there. Good luck, everybody. Northerlies across the Lynn Canal and down in toward Juneau southward. You're looking at winds around 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Southeasterlies working through the Clarence Strait at 40 knots with an 8-foot sea, and south and southeasterly winds coming up the coast around 20 to 25 knots with seas between 17 and 20 feet. The stronger winds and the higher seas up around Yakutat at this point. And for Thursday, look for an offshore flow between 25 and 30 knots in the north, 35 knots a little bit further south of Sitka with small crafts there. Southeasterlies in Clarence Strait with a 6-foot sea, and northerlies diminishing through Lynn Canal and into Stevens Passage. You're looking at 20 knots there with a 4-foot sea on Thursday. For south central, north and easterly winds still coming down Cook Inlet. That means colder air is still coming over the ice there as you head south of Kenai. 30-knot winds west of the Barrens, 25-knot winds from the north and east of the Barrens, and north and northeasterly winds across the northern parts of the Gulf with stronger winds just outside of Prince William Sound with 18-foot seas there. As we head into Thursday, the winds still coming in from the east to Kodiak Island with a 10-foot sea and 20-knot winds from the east again. Northerlies inside of Prince William Sound, and Cook Inlet looking at 10 to 20-knot winds from the north and northeast. For the Alaska Peninsula region, Bristol Bay still looking at northeasterlies with 35 knots over the ice, 20 knots coming in from the western Gulf to the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. 10 to 11 foot seas expected. They're more of a southeasterly shift as we head into Thursday. 15 to 20 knot winds on the Bering Sea coast with 5 foot seas north of Cold Bay. As we get to the Aleutians, northerlies are going to rule the rest of the week, it looks like, with that northeasterly flow coming off the continent. It is going to be cold across the central and eastern chain, 30 to 35 knots with 14 to 17 foot seas north of Adak and Atka, and 12 to 14 foot seas on the Pacific side. Look for very little change as we head into Thursday. Slight northeasterly shift there for Unalaska on either side. 25 to 30 knots in the east, 35 knots in the central chain with 16 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, 12 to 13 foot seas on the Pacific coast, and northeasterlies out around Kiska and Attu as we head toward Thursday afternoon. For the west coast, north and easterly winds will be the rule. Northerlies coming across St. Lawrence Island, reaching up to 40 knots around St. Paul and St. George as we head into Wednesday. So a rough day out there. 13 foot seas are expected. Northeasterlies outside of Kuskokwim Bay over the ice at 35 knots, about the same there around Nunivak Island. By Thursday, winds are diminishing just a little bit there around St. Paul and St. George. Every bit helps. 20 foot seas there coming in from the north, and winds also due north for St. Lawrence and St. Matthew Island waters hovering around 25 to 30 knots. Easterlies blowing across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and once again wind chill advisories and warnings posted for just about all of the North Slope tonight and tomorrow. Across Barrow, an easterly wind at 15 knots. Northerlies inside of Kotzebue Sound around 20 knots, and about the same there for Thursday. Easterlies still continuing for the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi Seacoast, 15 to 25 knots for Thursday. Northeasterlies around Cape Lisburne at 25 knots. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings for the northern parts of Southeast. A winter weather advisory for the Juneau region, looking for about 3 to 7 inches storm total, and a little bit higher, closer to 6 to 10, maybe more around Haines and Skagway as we head into tonight and tomorrow with a winter storm warning there. South Central could see some light snowfall as we head into the next 24 hours. That will be working its way northward and through the region with periods of rain and snow showers expected across southwestern Alaska. A better chance, though, for precipitation generally south of King Salmon with rain and snow, and a better chance around areas east of Norton Sound as we head into Thursday. Be careful out there. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.